Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to today's second half. Now, I did a survey and I stated that, I asked the question if the second half we could go into historically documented articles of Bigfoot, Wildman, and Dogman accounts. And by overwhelming numbers, it was yes. So we are going to start that today. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description below. And last but not least, if you'd really like to help the channel to continue to grow and go, all you'd have to do is subscribe and click the like button. It's fast and it's free. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on to today's second half. Shall we? So these are all historic accounts of Wildman, Bigfoot, Dogman that had been featured in magazine articles or newspaper articles. And we're going to start from like the 1600s all the way to the 1900s. Like I said, historic media accounts of Bigfoot, Wildman, and Dogman. So what I'll do is I will reveal the source first, and then the title, and then the story. Source: Gardner Soul, 1962 magazine article. Hairy Man reported. South America, 1595 through 96. Explorer Sir Walter Raleigh reported that he had heard from native people of the existence of hairy men in the woods, who was said to have built huts in the jungle. Source: Marvin Burham, 1970. Nespelem woman knows legend. Has she heard Sasquatch? The Wenatchee Daily Word, Washington, United States, February 6, 1970. An interview with Isabel Arcasa, a Nespelem woman who recalled the story, which was passed on to her by her mom. She puts the story at some 300 years old. Native tells of his abduction by hairy giants, Nespelem, Washington, circa 1670. A Nespelem native who disappeared while hunting with a group about 1 year ago was found today at about the same spot he had last been seen. When approached, he was simply standing with his arms folded and his eyes staring straight ahead as if in a trance. By his side was a dog that had been trained to bark once in warning and then remain silent. Upon regaining his senses, the native told of being captured and held prisoner by a group of hairy giants. He stated that he was not physically harmed by the creatures and shared their food and cedar bark shelters almost as an equal. He described his captors as hunters of great physical prowess, able to scamper up steep slopes or to shoulder heavy loads of game. Although not allowed to go hunting with them, he was allowed to travel around the mountains at night. He said they used whistling noises to communicate while hunting or on the move. Apparently, the creatures also possessed some sort of hypnotic powers. As he stated, they put him into a trance before taking him to the spot where he was found. The dog by his side was a gift. Source: Father Pierre Francois Xavier de Charlevoix, 1721, Charlevoix, Louisiana. Information is from a journal entry of December 25th, 1721. Jesuit priest reports native fear of mystery animal. Natchez, Mississippi, December 26, 1721. Father Pierre-Francois Xavier de Charlevoix recently arrived. Reports of great alarm in the settlement last evening. He was told that there was in the neighborhood a beast of unknown species of extraordinary bulk, and whose cry did not in the least resemble that of any known animal. However, when he questioned the natives, none of them had actually seen the creature. They had estimated its strength and size from the fact that it could carry off some sheep and calves. Father Pierre suggested that the creature was probably a large wolf, but none could be persuaded in this regard. The creature was heard again, and the natives ran out armed with whatever weapon they could find, but it was to no purpose. Source: Scott McLean Collection, The Wisconsin Argus, Madison, Wisconsin, USA, September 5th, 1844. The article recounts an event of about a century earlier. Wild girl captured in the local woods. Lisieux Forest, Wisconsin, September 5th, 1744. Shepherds recently found and captured a wild girl about 16 or 17 years of age in the forest. She was taken to a hospital in Mullion. She has not spoke or gave any sign of recollecting the past. Fast forward, at some point, the girl let it be known that she had been left by some other little girls in the woods. And when she was found, about 7 or 8, having been surprised by snow, the hospital people gave her grass and vegetables to eat, but she continued to droop and in a very short time died of grief from her loss of liberty. Source: Scott McLean Collection, Wisconsin Argus, Madison, September 5th, 1844. The article recounts an event about 80 years earlier. Wild man seen in local woods, Lisieux, Wisconsin, circa 1764. A wild man has been reported in the local woods. He is said to be very tall, strongly built, hairy like a bear, active as a lizard, and perfectly harmless. His delight is in coursing the sheep and dispensing them, uttering loud peals of laughter at the confusion he creates. Sometimes the shepherds sent their dogs after him, but he never suffered them to come up with him. Nothing is known or has been traced respecting the history. It is assumed that he was some child left by accident or design in a savage solitude, where like Orson some bear nourished him, but never found a Valentine to restore him to humanity. About 20 years ago, a young girl was found in the same forest. She was captured and placed in the hospital, where she died a short time later. Source: no official heading. The London Times, London, England, January 4th, 1784. New World wild man arrives in France, January 4th, 1784. There is lately arrived in France from America a wild man who was caught in the woods 200 miles back from the Lake of the Woods by a party of Indians. They had seen him several times, but he was so swift of foot that they could by no means get up with him. He is near 7 feet high, covered with hair, but has little appearance of understanding, and is remarkably sullen and subdued. When he was taken, half a bear was found lying by him, whom he had just killed. Source: John Green, 1981, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us. An account of a Nootka Sound in 1792. Nootka Sound, British Columbia, 1792. Jose Mozino, a naturalist of a Spanish voyage of exploration, reported the native people of the Pacific coast of North America have a strong belief in terrifying creatures called matlocks that are said to inhabit the vast forests there. Mozino states, I do not know what to say about matlocks, inhabitant of the mountainous district, of who all have an unbelievable terror. They, native people, imagine his body as very monstrous, all covered with stiff black bristled, a head similar to a human one, but with much greater, sharper, and stronger fangs than those of a bear, extremely long arms and toes and fingers armed with long, curved claws. His shouts alone, they say, force those who hear them to the ground, and any unfortunate body he slaps is broken into 1,000 pieces. So already, guys, we're seeing some Sasquatch encounters from back in the day. I believe what that Jesuit priest, Pierre, saw, Father Pierre, or was referring to, was a Dogman. And now this, I believe to be a werewolf or a Bigfoot. I'm leaning toward werewolf just by the description of the creature in general. Source, John Green, 1981, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us. Monster Tracks, Puzzle Explorer, Geographer. Jasper, present site of Alberta, January 7th, 1811. Geographer and explorer David Thompson reported the discovery of highly unusual footprints found in the snow near here. The snow was about 6 inches deep on ice, and the prints measured about 14 inches long by 8 inches wide at its widest. There were 4 large toes about 4 inches long, and each had a short claw. The ball of the foot sunk 3 inches lower than the toes. The prints were headed in a southerly direction, and Thompson estimated that they had been made about 6 hours before his arrival. He believes the prints were those of some monstrous bear. Comment: it is unlikely the tracks found by Thompson were those of a Sasquatch. Generally, this creature has 5 toes, and claws are not evident. However, other 4-toed tracks have been found. Although, only one other case where claws or nails were indicated in possible Bigfoot tracks. Unfortunately, Thompson does not indicate whether the prints were those of a creature with 2 or 4 legs. Nevertheless, as he mentions, they are possible bear prints. 4 legs are indicated. I'm thinking Dogman. That's just me, but Dogman. Source, Scott McLean's newspaper article collection, the Galveston Daily News, Texas, United States, from the Clarksville Advisor, South Carolina, June 11th, 1889. A monster animal. He was 7 feet height, covered with hair, and walked erect. Tugaloo River area, South Carolina, now Tugaloo, 1816. A native hunting party reported shooting a monster animal in this region that was most unlike other animals. One of the hunters relayed that after establishing a camp east of the Tugaloo River, they all went hunting, leaving a deer they killed that evening previous at the camp. At night, when they returned to the camp, the deer was gone, and the next day the same thing was reported. They then decided to leave an old Indian to guard the camp and see what was happening with this deer. That day, the old Indian saw a monster animal come and carry off the deer, and was afraid to make any attempt to kill the monster, which was about 7 feet in height, and walked erect, like a man, hairy all over, and its mouth was in the chin and great claws on the fingers and toes. The next day, all 7 of the Indians stayed at camp, and, as usual, the monster came, gathered up the deer, and started off. When one of them fired at it, the ball taking effect in the back, the animal dropped the deer, turned, and started toward them. When the other 6 poured a volley into its breast, it fell dead. About 3 hours after that, the natives heard a noise like someone hooling a mile in distance. Yahoo, Yahoo, Yahoo. The natives left the camp and called on a posse for protection. A party of whites on horses with all the dog they could get. Then went in search of other animal and found it. It was like the one the Indians had killed, and putting the dogs after it, when it appeared in sight, the animal would run, but it could whip every dog they could get to attack it. The party pursued it to the river, and at 2 jumps it went across, where it was then shot. Note the original time frame place this article was during the time the Indians were in the South. The area where the incident took place was home to the Cherokee, who gave up their lands in treaties signed in 1777 and 1816. Source: Edinburgh Advisor, Florida, USA, July 21st, 1818. Wild animal, like a baboon seen. Apalachicola, Florida, June 1818. The Apalachicola Gazette states that the habitation of some unknown animal has just been discovered in the upper part of the Apalachicola, which has given rise to many strange conjectures. The animal at the time of the discovery was in it, but made its escape. It is said by those who have seen it to resemble a baboon somewhat, and for the size of the nest it is judged to be about 5 foot in height, and a carnivorous description, as many bones were found about the premise. The nest was neatly made of loose cotton between several bales. Source: Janet and Colin Board, 1982, The Bigfoot Casebook. From the Exeter Watchman, New York, New York, September 6th, 1818. Sackett Harbor, New York, August 30th, 1818. Reports say that in the vicinity of Ellisboro was seen on the 30th ULT by a gentleman of unquestionable veracity, an animal resembling the wild man of the woods. It is stated that he came from the woods within a few rods of this gentleman, that he stood and looked at him, and then took its flight in the direction which gave a perfect view of him for some time. He is described as bending forward when running, hairy, and the heel of the foot narrow, spreading the toes. Hundreds of persons have been in pursuit for several days, but nothing further is heard of him. The frequent and positive manner in which this story comes induces us to believe. We wish not to impeach the veracity of this highly favored gentleman, yet it is proper that such natural improbability accounts should be established by the mouth of at least 2 direct eyewitnesses to entitle them. So pretty much what the paper is saying is they don't know if this guy is telling the truth, but they wish they had another person to back this guy's credit. Source: Christopher L. Murphy, Know the Sasquatch. Native art depicts cannibal monster, North Carolina, 1820. David Cusick, a Tuscarora native has depicted what he terms as a cannibal monster in one of his unique drawings. In his artwork, an ominous creature is seen watching a native woman parching acorns. It was frightened away because it thought the woman was eating red-hot coals. Natives have long believed the existence of such creatures and often depict them in their art. Source: Meshick Browning, 1829. 4 years of the life of a hunter. The autobiography of Meshick Browning. Mountain monster mystifies huntsman. Appalachian Mountains, May 10th, 1829. Meshick Browning, a huntsman, tells of a strange encounter with an unusual beast while out hunting in the local mountains. Browning states, "I saw a bear coming to his feeding place, and such a looking animal I had never seen in my life. He has long and tall, and his back bowed up like a fighting hog. His legs look like a naked man's arms, and he walked along as if he scarcely felt the ground. In fact, he was the poorest-looking beast I had ever seen. He came out until he reached the tracks which I made in the forepart of the day, when off he broke. I sent 2 good dogs after him, and in a few minutes they were out of hearing. But in an hour or 2 the dogs returned, completely tired." Browning recounted another incident that night or early morning, this time concerning an unusual forest sound. He states, "Some time late in the night I was awakened by the most frightful noise I had ever heard in my life. It was as loud and harsh as a lowing of an ox, and seemed to echo from the other side of the hill on which I was camped, and the whole space above seemed to resound with noise. It continued for 20 minutes, as near as I could judge, and seemed to die away by degrees, until all was again quiet. I supposed then, and yet think, that it was caused by 2 old male panthers, which had met and got into a fight, and being of cat species, they make a similar noise, only much stronger and coarser, but I cannot say for certain what animal made the noise." Source: History of Morrow County and Ohio, 1880. Was Ohio an abode of giants? Morrow County, Ohio, 1829. Construction workers building the new motel in Chesterville are all abuzz this morning after making an unusual discovery. The workers dug into a nearby native burial mound to get material for making bricks and uncovered a large human skeleton. Particularly noteworthy was the jawbone, which was larger than the jaw of a notable large-jawed local citizen. But local physician examined the cranium and reported that it was proportionally larger and had more teeth than the white race of today. The skeleton was taken to Mansfield for further examination. Comment: the skeleton has since been lost to history, most likely in an unmarked box in some museum storage room. There may be some connection here with the giant skeleton found in Yosemite Valley, California in 1895, and the giant bones found in the Lovelock Cave near Lovelock, Nevada, 1911. Source: John Green, 1973 Sasquatch file. Rare specimen of American antiquity. New York, March 1831. Benjamin Harding of Missouri claims to have uncovered the skeleton of a giant well in the western country. He wrote to a Dr. Mitchell informing of his discovery. The following is an excerpt from that letter, which is dated Missouri, March 16, 1831. Respected Sir, permit me to commune with you on a subject of a natural American relic of antiquity. It is the skeleton of an individual of a human race measuring nearly 10 feet, which I have discovered in the western country. Should you think it worthy of place among the rarities of the land, be pleased to inform me. The Fredonia Censor, New York, reported on the find as follows from this account. We can see that the location was Mississippi. New York, May 18th, 1831, a human skeleton measuring nearly 10 feet in length was discovered in Mississippi a short time since by Mr. Benjamin Harding. There were giants in the lands in those days. Genesis. Comment, unfortunately, we do not have anything further connecting with this find. However, it is information like this that leads some researchers to believe that such remains are in old crate-marked bones of some sort in a state museum basement or storage room. Source: Clark, Jerome, 1999, Unexplained. Strange creature seen in Himalayas. Walks on two legs. Himalayas, circa 1832. Native hunters in this region reported that they encountered an erect, tailless creature with long, dark hair all over its body. Believing that it was a demon, the hunters fled in terror. It is thought the creature was an orangutan. Source: A Wild Man in the Woods. The Memphis Inquirer, Memphis, Tennessee. May 9th, 1851. Odd creature spotted. St. Francis, Poinsett, and Greene Counties, Arkansas. 1834. A hair-covered creature of gigantic stature has been seen in these counties by sportsmen and hunters. There is no speculation on what the oddity may be, but it is very different from other animals common to the area. Source: John Green, 1981, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us. Comes to us from The Strange Animal or Food for the Marvelous, Aurora, Dorchester County, Maryland, August 27th, 1838. A Whistling Wild Boy of the Woods, Southwest Bridgewater, August 1837. There is considerable talk about a strange animal said to have been seen in the area, although the individual who described the animal persisted in declaring that he had seen it and was at first considerably frightened by it. The story was heard and looked upon more as food for the marvelous than as having any foundation in fact. He represented the animal, as we have it through a third person, as having the appearance of a child 7 or 8 years old, though somewhat slimmer and covered entirely in hair. He saw it while picking berries, walking towards him erect and whistling like a person. After recovering from his fright, he is said to have pursued it, but it ran off with such speed, whistling as it went, that he could not catch it. He said it ran like the devil and continued to call it after the name. Source: John Green, 1981, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us. Again, from The Strange Animal or Food for Mysterious, Aurora, Dorchester County, Maryland, August 27th, 1838. Hairy Whistling Wild Boy dodges bullets. Silver Lake Township, Pennsylvania, 1837. A youth, some 16 years old, working in the backwoods near the New York state line, is greatly perturbed over an unusual incident. He heard someone approaching him, whistling merrily, whom he took as his younger brother. It approached within about 16 feet, stopped, whereon the youth looked upon it. To his amazement and utter shock, he gazed at something that had the appearance of a human, but was covered in black hair. In size, it was about the same as his 6 to 7-year-old younger brother. The youth had a gun, but it was some distance away. He quickly ran over, got the weapon, and fired at the creature, but was trembling so much that he could not hold the gun still. Just as he fired, the creature stepped behind a tree and darted off, whistling in the same manner as it approached. The youth's father stated that his son was greatly frightened by this incident. at the number of times during the afternoon when thinking about the animal he had seen, the youth would burst out crying. Source: Scott McLean, 2005. When Will Wonders Cease? Reprinted from A Wild Man of the Woods, Huron Reflector, Norwalk, Huron County, Ohio, June 25th, 1839. Ape-like creature and cubs captured along the Mississippi River. Upper Mississippi River, April 1st, 1839. Mr. Robert Lincoln of Boston and his timber survey crew, Western Lumber Company, recently captured 3 unusual ape-like creatures along the Mississippi. The creatures, 1 adult and 2 cubs, were encountered during surveillance for lumbering prospects in the area. As it happened, the adult creature was sighted a couple of times, and Lincoln gave orders to capture it alive if possible. As he was giving his orders, the creature appeared at some distance, and Lincoln observed it with his pocket glass, a handheld telescope. Lincoln estimated its height between 8 to 9 feet. The group pursued the creature, which at one point turned upon them, so Lincoln shot at the calf of the leg with buckshot. The creature was bound and taken back to camp. The next morning, 2 cubs about 3 feet in height and very similar to the large creature wandered into camp. The cubs were captured without resistance, and when the adult creature, probably a parent, saw them, it reacted violently. Lincoln took the creatures to Boston, where he invited Boston Time people to see them. The Times reporter, an old acquaintance of Mr. Lincoln, went with other newspaper people down to Lincoln's rooms to examine the creature. The reporter provided the following description of the adult creature. He is a horrid-looking creature and reminds us very strongly of the fabled satyr, as we have pictured them with our own mind. He is about 8 feet 3 inches in height when standing erect, and his frame is of giant proportions in every part. His legs are not straight, but like those of any other 4-footed animal, and his whole body is covered with a hide very much like a cow. His arms are very long and large and ill proportioned. It does not appear from his manner that he ever walked on 4 legs. His fingers' toes are mere bunches, arms with soot claws. His head is covered with thick, coarse, black-like hair, mane of a horse. The appearance of its countenance, if such it may be called, is very distinguished, say almost horrible. It is covered with a thinner and lighter coat of hair than the rest of its body. There is no appearance of eyebrows or nose. The mouth is very large, wide, similar to that of a baboon. The eyes are very dull and heavy. There is no indication of cunning or activity about them. Mr. Lincoln says he is beyond dispute carnivorous, as he universally rejects bread and vegetables and eats flesh with great avidity. He thinks he is of the orang-outang species. Oh my. But from what we have seen, we are inclined to consider him a wild animal, somewhat resembling a man. He is, to say at least, one of the most extraordinary creatures that have ever been brought before the public from any part of this earth or the waters under the earth, and we believe will prove a difficult puzzle to the scientific. He lies down like a brute, does not appear to possess more instinct than common domestic animals. He is now quite tame and quiet, and is only confined by a stout chain attached to his legs. It is Mr. Lincoln's intent to submit these animals to the inspection of the scientific for a few days, in order to ascertain what they are, and after that dispose of them to some person for exhibition. Mr. Lincoln himself will return to St. Peter's in the course of 2 or 3 weeks. Comments: the reporter does not mention the cubs, which is somewhat unusual. Also, the description of the adult creature's hands and legs do not match what we believe to be a Sasquatch. Further, to our knowledge, there are no other reports of the creature. Source, Jerome Clark, 2005, Unnatural Phenomenon. Adams Sentinel, Pennsylvania, December 30th, 1839. Wild Child, Fish Lake, Indiana, December 4th, 1839. Strange as it may appear, it is currently reported and very generally believed that a wild child or a lad is now running at large among the sand hills round and in the vicinity of Fish Lake. It is reported taupe, about 4 feet high, covered with a light coat of chestnut-colored hair. It runs with great velocity, and when pursued, as often been the case, it sets up the most frightful and hideous yells and seems to make efforts at speaking. It has been seen during the summer months running along the lake shore, apparently in search of fish and frog, and appears to be very fond of the water, for it will plunge into Fish Lake and swim with great velocity, all the time whining the most piteously. All right, guys, so this is the first night of some historic media submissions of Dogman, Werewolf, Wildman, Bigfoot. I don't know. They all seem like what we have described seeing in the recent past. So it's pretty interesting. And I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I enjoy sharing this with you. Anyway, may the Great Spirit watch over us all. And may he guide us down that path that we call life. Oh yeah, really quick. I took a drive today and went up north to the Adirondack Mountains. And, well, that video will be out tomorrow as well. All right, guys, have a good night.